Hello and welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and today is episode 125. Quick reminder to support us by following us on LinkedIn. I wanted to mention episode notes are available. There's a short link, glue.co/IOH-125. With that, happy to introduce Dr. Daniel Fett, product owner of the German EUDI Wallet infrastructure at Sprint. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
So, Daniel, before we dive in, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how you got here?
Sure. So it all started with me pursuing a PhD in web security topics, and we did develop this method to formally analyze web security and security protocols based on web technologies, essentially. And we developed this model, and we thought it works great, but we had to find some target to analyze, and we first looked at Mozilla Browser ID, which some people might remember. But when we published our results, people kept asking, have you taken a look at OAuth yet? And we were like, no, there are like 11 research papers on OAuth already. That doesn't make sense. We will not find any new security problems and so on. That went 2 or 3 times after our publications. People kept asking, what about OAuth? Then we finally analyzed OAuth and found new security vulnerabilities like the mix-up attack in OAuth. That's how I came into this whole identity space.
And I think I remember that. What year was that?
2015, 16, around that time. So quite a while ago. It was quite fun. That's when I essentially started also engaging in the OAuth community, ITF, started writing specs. First one was the OAuth security BCP, which we completed actually this year. Took a while. Now I'm editor of various specs like SDJOT, SDJOT VC, FAPI, cross-device security BCP, which will be relevant for this topic here. OpenID for verifiable presentations, also relevant. So now I'm somehow deep into this community. And
all the hardest, newest ones. And one of those just went final. Was it the presentation spec?
Yes. Went final.
And we're expecting several others to subsequently go final.
Right.
What's the next one you expect?
Next big step is OpenID for VCI, verifiable credential issuance. So the complementary spec for the other leg, so to say. And then the HYPE, the high assurance interoperability profile. Big milestones.
So we need to do some subsequent episodes on those. You think I should wait for all of them to get go final and then discuss them as one group, or discuss them one by one?
I think we hope that there's not too much time between VCI and HYPE, so one big group might make sense. Let's see whether we can stick to that plan.
And this is exciting. I mean, just because there have been a lot of versions of this. Is this like version 30 or something? Like what was the final version number before?
Oh, I don't even know. I don't think it was 30 though. I think it was below 20. But yeah, it's so I think I've never encountered a specification that has so many like actual authors working on, like people in the working group, not just providing their opinion and input, but also actually providing text for the spec and reviewing stuff and so on. So this really was a group effort by so many people. It was quite impressive, actually. And yeah, so
how radically different was version 1 and like the last version?
Oh, quite different. So I'm not sure if I. So when I really started engaging in that spec, it was not first version. It was a little bit later, but we did experiments at that time, I was at yes.com together with Thorsten, and we did experiments with these, like with presentation over OAuth and so on. I think it's fair to say that it was quite different in almost every aspect, because we learned a lot along the way. We learned what works, what doesn't work. We learned about security problems, but most importantly, we learned what like the requirements people have. Not only people have, but also like the EUDI ecosystem here in Europe, where the EU legislator said, please create an actual wallet ecosystem. And with that, they wrote down lots of requirements. So we had to develop a spec that actually works, that fulfills these requirements or provides the mechanisms to deliver what the European Commission wants to see.
I want to pivot into the topic of today's conversation, because I think that you're starting to touch on that, which is like, we need to solve these actual, like, problems. Everyone just wants this stuff to work like magic, like magic, you'll just use your device and connect it, and we'll do some magic crypto stuff in the background, and that'll make it like safe. But the problem that I think you identified when I was reading your LinkedIn post is something that we've been working on for a long time, which is this idea that if you can trick somebody to go to your website through phishing, and remember, phishing is the main attack surface area. This is where the attack starts. But if you can get somebody to click on that link, and my number one security advice for your family is, don't click on that link. Whatever it is, if it comes in email, don't click on it. But you click on some link and you go, and actually, maybe I could show the diagram now. Okay, let's try. I mentioned it's always kind of dicey to share diagrams on this. So this is a diagram from the book I wrote in 2019 called Securing the Perimeter. This is from the chapter on authentication. And I used to call this the man in the middle attack. But basically, you get an email from your bank, and the bank says, oh, I need you to approve this thing, or I see your deposit from yesterday. And you click on it, but you don't know that the bank's DNS has been hacked, and the hacker has added in a new host name that's going to send you to their website. And they actually obtain a certificate for this host name. And so from your perspective as the end user, you see, oh, I'm going to chase.com. I don't know that particular server, but it's a green, little lock, so it looks good to me. And you go ahead and you enter your password and your OTP, which the attacker then proxies to the website, and then starts sending you back your content. So you're seeing your balance and you're seeing all your real content. And then you hit to add wire transfer, and then they change the values of the wire transfer recipient or something, right? And so this attack has been around, for a while. It's one of the reasons why we dropped Superglue as a product. My point with Superglue is always it doesn't protect against this, and we should be using, there's better technology in FIDO and built into the device now. We shouldn't be using an out-of-channel, non-correlatable association here. But was this sort of your starting point for the challenge that you were looking at?
Yes. So essentially, this is the classic phishing setup, right? I run a website that looks similar to the original one. And in a world where people use username and password, and maybe they get an OTP, phishing can happen like you show here in this diagram. So it's just a matter of fact that username and password, even with an OTP, are not phishing resistant. It depends on the user actively checking that they are on the right domain. And this is not something
impossible.
Yeah, this is not something we can reasonably expect from users. It's just not possible. So we need phishing-resistant methods. And if you think about classic login scenarios, we have stuff like FIDO WebAuthn, where you can essentially have your browser do that domain check for you. It's a little bit simplified, but essentially your browser ensures that those credentials that you need for the actual domain are never sent to any other domain, which is nice. So the browser, at least as long as that domain of the bank is secure in that example.
FIDO would prevent this. That's why FIDO can verify that, because the secret never leaves here, we can verify that this can't be proxy. Exactly your use case, though. You're talking about a different, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're in this wallet world now, for better or worse, but wallets will probably be the future, where you have some app on your phone, and with that app on your phone, you can go to a website, for example, of the bank, and then the bank will ask, if you want to open a new bank account, please provide some identity credential, and then you can show your identity credential, and then the bank knows, okay, that is the correct user, so we can allow bank account opening in the name of that user. So it's a little bit different,
even offline, right? Or you used to have to do this in person, but you're saying like a use case like creating a bank account, which requires you to present your ID. You could potentially do that offline, right? With a new presentation, right?
You could also do it offline,
right? Not offline, but I mean not at the bank. Not you're at home.
Exactly. You're at home. You want to. Well, there's all sorts of e-government services and other services where you need to prove your identity, and then so this is where you have this problem, and it's not only about identity credentials, even other credentials. So hopefully in the future we will have one wallet where you can have many types of credentials, be it your driver's license or your, I don't know, club card or whatever. So you can have whatever in your wallet.
Your Identirati card. I want to issue an Identirati card, because now that you've been on the show, you're an Identirati, because I can issue you a credential that you can show that you've been a guest.
Yes, I need that. So we have a similar situation as in the figure you just showed, where the user goes to a website and they want to present something that either lives on the same device, so it's either that they are on their phone and they want to present a credential from that phone to that website, or it can be cross-device, where the user is on their desktop computer, maybe they want to do something, and then they want to present a credential to do that. And that credential might live on their phone. So you have this additional hop from the desktop to their phone, and then the credential presentation. And that's actually important for later on in the Digital Credentials API, because these are the one case where everything lives on the same device is much easier to the attack is much easier to solve in that case compared to the cross-device case.
Should I show my other animation?
Sure. I heard it's a highly.
So we will try and do this. So hold on, let me replace. I think a picture maybe helps. Replace screen sharing with. Let's try this one. So we're basically talking about a situation where a user is going to open up a bank account on their laptop, and they're like, okay, great, we need your identity. Here's a QR code that you can scan it. And basically you take out your phone and then you scan that QR code, and that prompts like some type of interaction with the wallet, where then you then choose a credential and send a credential through. So is that that's the use case you're talking about?
Exactly, yeah. That's what we refer to as the cross-device flow.
Yeah. Um, and that was a great animation.
Yes.
Basically, I just added the phone. Um, so, um, and in my first example, I was talking about, phishing and how the user can be tricked to go to the wrong website. Is there a parallel risk here where we're going to an attacker website and it's asking us to present our credential?
Exactly. So the idea is you can present your credential essentially at any website. So it's an open ecosystem. There's a bank, there can be other banks, there can be other services that ask for your credentials. So as a user, in a regular case, without an attacker present, you would go to the bank website. Bank asks you to present a credential or shows the QR code. You show your credential or present your credential. And that credential is essentially sent over a back channel connection to that bank. And then the bank knows, okay, the credential presentation has happened. And there's some random number in there to tie it to your session where you said, I want to create a bank account. And then the bank knows in that session, the user is authenticated or identified at least. And then the interaction can continue. And the attack that we have in these cases is very similar to the phishing attack. So an attacker sets up a phishing website, as in your example, or on a different domain and maybe with a very similar looking domain. The user goes there, and then the attacker will take or play the role of the bank. So the attacker will show, do you want to create a new bank account? And then please click here and so on. And in the background, what the attacker does is the attacker will interact with the real bank in the background and do the same steps with the real bank in the background up until the point where the real bank asks for the presentation of the credential. And the attacker does all these steps and then gets for example, the QR code from the real bank, and it just replays that towards the victim. So the victim will think they're interacting with the real bank, and they go through all these onboarding steps, and then they come to the QR code. So they will take out their phone and scan the QR code and present their credential. Now, the request that is encoded in that QR code will tell them this is for opening a bank account at this bank. And this is exactly what the user wants to do. They just don't know that they are not at that bank, but they are at the attacker's website. So they will just happily click accept, right? So they will say, yeah, please present this credential and so on.
In fact, I am creating an account right now.
Yes. That's exactly what they want in that moment, just not with the attacker in the middle. And then this presentation, it will happen from the user's phone directly to the real bank. And that's, for the attacker, that's perfectly fine, because as I said, in that presentation, which is essentially just sharing a signed document saying, yeah, this is my credential and I want to present it now. There's this session ID, this random number, from the real session between the bank and the attacker. Right. So this presentation happens, and the bank will notice, okay, this is a presentation. It belongs to that session between the attacker and the bank. The user will think it belongs to a session between them and the bank, which is that it doesn't. And then, so presentation happens and so on, and then the flow can be completed. So the attacker can complete the account creation at the bank, because this presentation happened essentially out of band between the real user and the bank. And now the attacker has opened a bank account in the victim's name in a session that is under their control. So they may attach their real credentials or login credentials to that bank account, whatever, right? So it's an account that was created essentially by the attacker with the user's identity. So, and that's the attack.
So the thing that you need to prevent is that the one thing that the attacker never had, which you never checked, is proximity to the device. The attacker is probably in a foreign country, and the user's device should be in a certain location. So if you can say, well, this browser has proximity to this device, I can have better assurance that it's this device, and I can do a stronger authentication and prevent
Exactly.
that man-in-the-middle attack. So
if you take a look from 10,000 feet on these kind of protocols, it's always the same, whether you're talking about SAML, OAuth, OpenID Connect, whatever, or in this case, OpenID 4VP. It's essentially always the same. So you get a request, you do something, and then you send the response back. So in OAuth, it's the authorization request, you log in and so on, and then the authorization response. In OpenID 4VP, it's the presentation request, you do the presentation and get a response, which is the presentation in that case. It's always the same pattern. And in all of these protocols, there are always the same 2 points where you can try to mitigate the attack. The one is when the request is sent from, in this case, the verifier, the bank, to the user. And second point is when the presentation is sent back. And in classic OAuth, we do we have a mitigation that works on the second point. So in classic OAuth, you check that when the response is sent, the authorization response is sent, that there's a cookie that tells, in this case, the bank, that this belongs to the same request where you created the authorization, the same session where you created the authorization request beforehand. So that it all belongs together. You ensure that there's a cookie in the browser. We don't have that option here. So if you do a cross-device flow, as I just explained, where you jump from one device to the other, then it's always a different device. So by design, a user starts the onboarding with the bank on one device. They scan the QR code, and they are on a different device. So it's by design that this breaks this mitigation that we have in OAuth. We cannot use it any longer because we are just on a different device. And the question is, how do we know that these belong together? Like there's some, as you said, proximity between the two. And there's this, and this is not a new problem, right? So this is a problem, as I said, in all redirect-based protocols, essentially, you always have this problem. But if you do cross-device...
That diagram I showed was from my book, which was published in 2019. Right. But I probably that chapter had probably been written for 2 or 3 years by the time I published it.
It's not a new problem, but now we have these cross-device flows by design, and we want to ensure that there's somehow a connection between the devices and they belong to the same user.
Well, the Bluetooth connection is a really elegant solution. Of course, it assumes that your device has Bluetooth turned on, or maybe not. I don't know. That always seems dicey to me. When I used to get in my car, I'd pop in a CD and music would play, and now I pop it in and music plays, and I wonder if it's going to disconnect when I get out of range of my house, and I never know. So Bluetooth doesn't make me think it's just works all the time. But anyway, but it's a very elegant solution, though. I understand you're not actually making a Bluetooth connection. You're just using sort of environmental Bluetooth information. So the user probably doesn't even know that they're using Bluetooth ever.
So the solution is obviously the Digital Credentials API in the title of this podcast. And the API itself is an abstraction layer. The API says you can transfer this request essentially from one device to the other, and I'll take care of the details, and also I'll take care of ensuring that there is this proximity between the devices. And currently, the solution that is implemented to ensure that proximity is exactly this Bluetooth connection. No, it's not actually a connection. What happens instead is you start a session between the desktop computer and the smartphone, And for that session establishment, essentially half of the information is encoded in the QR code. And the other half is encoded in a Bluetooth BLE beacon. This is something that is relatively easy to implement and relatively stable. Essentially, the desktop computer just sends out very short Bluetooth packages saying, here's some piece of information. It's essentially a broadcast. And the phone then, after scanning the QR code, can put these two pieces of information back together. The information from the QR code and the information that came from the Bluetooth beacon. And that's very nice, because only if you have both pieces of information, you can establish the connection. So somebody that...
So it's like an ephemeral key almost.
Say
or
again?
it's used as input to make an ephemeral key?
Yeah, I think so. So you have this encrypted connection afterwards. The actual connection right now goes over a server. There are plans to change that and also to introduce new methods so that you can also use it completely offline. But right now, the idea is you have this session establishment via QR code and BLE, and then so both parties talk to the same server. So essentially a tunneling or of some sorts.
Interesting.
And then you have the session, and the session, like by the way it has been established, you have already ensured that both devices are in Bluetooth range. And not only that, but the user has actually scanned the QR code. And that gives you a very good assurance that you that you as a website can trust that this is hard to replay. I'm not saying it's impossible, because of course you could take the Bluetooth signal and replay it somewhere else, but that would require physical proximity of the attacker, or at least a device over which the attacker has a lot of control for receiving and sending these Bluetooth beacons. And that is hard to do. That's the basic idea, and it's super interesting to look at this problem. So I generally use the term session fixation for these kinds of problems, where you where can take a session and pull it out of the context and replay it to somebody else. And they're always the same solutions or non-solutions for them. So I have this ITF draft together with Peter Kasselman, where you have where we discuss this problem of cross-device flows. And we go through all the solutions that have been proposed for this problem. And the proposed solutions are always the same, and most of them just don't work. People come up with stuff like one-time use QR codes, and they just don't work because the attacker can just replay them, or time-based changing QR codes, stuff like that. It just doesn't work. People suggest, I've heard that in the wallet context, people suggest signing the QR codes. That doesn't work. It doesn't matter whether they are signed or not. I can just replay them. Or website authentication. In the EU, there are these like EV plus TLS certificates called QWACs. They've been proposed as a solution for this, but it doesn't work because this is not a problem of website authentication.
Or geolocation can be spoofed with a VPN.
Network location, right. That doesn't work either.
So it turns out that looking for Bluetooth proximity, doing a quick proof for Bluetooth proximity, ends up mitigating like most of like this attack. Maybe there are some really determined attackers who can, grok through installing something on your device and capturing it, but still it's going to block most of it. But somehow this means that Bluetooth is a feature that's in the browser. There's no web browser interface for Bluetooth. So doesn't this mean that we're going to have to actually get the browser makers to collaborate on this?
Yeah. So of course you need both parts, as in the web API, so that the bank knows which API to use, and then the actual interoperability between, say, a Microsoft Windows desktop PC and an iPhone. And that is the part that is obviously a little bit more tricky. So I don't have a full view on what exactly is implemented where, but from what I heard, it's being implemented in similar ways in various operating systems and browsers, which is good. So we are getting there. So right now it's in FIDO, it's CTAP 2.2 hybrid, essentially extended to send those credentials. Yeah, but so it's being worked on, and that is actually the biggest blocker that we have right now. Also in the EU context, where we want to start using this because it does protect users, but the support is not quite there yet. It's implemented in some in many platforms, but it's not really rolled out for all users, and yeah, so it's being worked on.
For what would be the first 3 browsers you'd expect to see support something like this? Or in what order do you think? Chrome would be first, my guess.
So I think it's already there on Safari. I haven't tested for myself, so please take this with a grain of salt. In Chrome, I think it's behind a feature flag, but you can essentially already use it. Firefox, I don't know. There have been some concerns by Mozilla on the privacy of this, and so that will probably not appear really soon.
So one thing that sort of gives me pause about passkeys and FIDO can be confusing pop-ups from like the browser. The browser is asking me to do, and I have to know to click on some weird. What's the user? What do you think the user implications are here? And if we're still struggling to roll out passkeys, are we ready to actually figure out how to juggle digital credentials too?
So I think there's a difference between this and passkeys. In an ideal world, people will not really notice that they're using something else here. So in an ideal world, so there's this nice website, digital-credentials.dev, where you can already test this cross-device flow. In an ideal world, people will just install the wallet app, and then it will just work for them. So they will go on their bank website, and then the website will trigger that API, or will notice that this API is present, trigger the API. And then the user just sees this QR code, and with an instruction to scan it with their device. So at no point in that flow, it needs an active decision by the user. My impression from passkeys, but the experts out there know that better than I do, but my impression for passkeys is that right now they are all often offered in parallel to existing login mechanisms. And that requires a decision by the user. That requires a decision where you want to store your passkeys. Is it in your browser directly? Is it in your password manager, and so on? So it's more challenging for users who just don't know the technology. Whereas for the DC API, I hope that it will just be the standard flow at some point.
When do you think you'll have a EUDI wallet in your hands and be able to present it at a lot of websites? Is this something that's going to happen in the next, 2 to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Hopefully we are more in the 2 to 3 years range. So we are working on building both the infrastructure and the actual wallet in Germany. I know in other member states it's very similar. So it will not be perfect. It will not be complete in every aspect in the beginning. But I'm pretty sure that we'll soon see the first identity credentials being actual credentials, production environment credentials. being used over the web, hopefully even next year.
So I know that there's a lot of desire for sovereignty from big tech in Europe. I've heard,
That's true.
and um, and so what are the thoughts about saying, hey, we finally just defined our own wallet, but in order to run it, you have to use one of these big tech browsers and laptops.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So yes, it's true that sovereignty, digital sovereignty, is a big topic right now, and there are good reasons for it. So the thing is, I think there are different interpretations or translations into what that means, what we should do now and what we shouldn't do now. And one of the interpretations is certainly, let's not use anything that is connected to big tech at all anymore. I don't think that is quite the right interpretation. I think the interpretation must be whatever we do must be based on open standards, on open interfaces, so that in case there's a problem, we can exchange it. We can switch to another solution. We can switch to a homegrown solution because we are using open standards and so on. So there are people who just say, oh, this is from Google, we cannot use it. Or even saying, yeah, Google is somehow participating in this, we cannot use it at all. I think we should really focus on open standards, and that means putting money into open standards, because it takes the work of actual people going to the working groups and so on, and providing their opinion there and working on creating standards. And then ensuring that these standards are designed such that they can be implemented by other vendors as well. And then you're not dependent on that single big tech from the US, but you can use, I don't know, other companies, maybe from Europe, maybe from elsewhere. Yeah, so
how many wallets do you think there will be? Will each country have its own wallet? Will everyone just use Apple Wallet or Google Wallet? What do you think that wallet ecosystem is going to look like?
So generally in Europe, I think we will see one wallet per member state at least. Some member states will probably work on the same wallet, so it's roughly one wallet per member state. But the details differ per member state. In Germany, we have adopted a mixed model. So we say the German government will provide one wallet for people that want to use it, and this will be also the first one to go live. But there's room for private entities providing their own wallet. This can be, for example, Google or Samsung or Apple, but it could also be banks, for example, or other I don't know, big companies that are somehow trusted, that somehow have some kind of interest in providing a wallet. So it's an open model in Germany, at least. I know for other member states it's different, but that's what we do. So we expect that let's say, there are at least 2, 3, 4, 5 wallets in Germany.
Including so all the wallet, getting back to the topic of our conversation, all of the wallet vendors would have to support this W3C Credentials API as a way to do this presentation. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is that you also need to make sure that the platform that we have today, which is, laptops running Windows or Mac OS, that they can also, that's the hard part, is to get that support.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask a question that was asked by a guest, Timo Glastra. Perhaps you know him. He's in the ecosystem. Yeah.
Yep.
He has the hardest question for a LinkedIn live stream we've had yet. So I'm just going to read it. Let me start it here. He says, UX and security-wise, I'm a big fan of the DC API, but I'm a bit afraid about the need for platform OS integration. For example, Apple only announced support for 18013-7 protocol for the DCI API with MDocs, and it seems the set of allowed credential types is limited to 4: MDL, EU PID, Japan My Number, and Photo ID. So, any thoughts on the on Timo's comment?
So you have these platforms like Apple, and they have, in the DC API world, they have to make this decision what they want to support. And that is a problem right now. So it would not be correct to say that this is not a problem. I hope that we can get to a point where other companies in the market will provide more features than those you just listed, in particular supporting OpenID for VP on that interface as well. And where that gets us to a position that Apple just has to move a little bit and support other things as well. But of course, that's dreaming to some extent. The other lever we have in the EU is, of course, regulations. So you could say, the EU could say, yeah, we really need support for this, so we mandate it, which should be last resort. I hope that this is not needed. But yeah, it's not easy. It's but so people have been saying that this is a problem in terms of, or people have been saying this problem is so big that we should not move to the DC API, and I would disagree with that because it's a tech feature that needs to be supported in order to provide the best security and privacy here. But there are other features like it that just happen to be standard, like web browsers, right? So nobody standardizes web browsers, but it's an open ecosystem that works. And if Apple would not support cookies, for example, nobody would use the Apple browser. So I hope that we can get to the same point where support for the DC API is just a default. So it's just there, and you cannot not support it with a reasonable feature set.
Interesting. Last thoughts before we break?
So I think there have been so many discussions around DC API, and especially in the EU context, as you just said, with sovereignty and so on. I hope that we can really close this gap, the security gap that we have, because just using links as we do right now is really a terrible solution for user experience, for privacy and security. And I just don't know of any other feature that could deliver the same, the same comfort and security as DC API. So I really hope we can move there.
Cool. Well, I'm going to put in the episode notes, I'm going to put a link. We had Sam Goto talking about this topic a while back, maybe like 50 episodes back. I'm going to put a link to that episode too, because yeah, it's a really interesting capability for a number of reasons. And with that, I just want to announce the next episode. Eve Mailer and Jacob Idejay will be joining us next week for an episode on personas, the next security plus UX control we need for identity. And with that, I will say thank you, audience, and thank you, Daniel, for joining us for this episode.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.